David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We've been talking quite a bit over the last few months over this question of whether a sitting president can be indicted. And the reason that this is a relevant question is because of our current president. We know that our current president directed his attorney, Michael Cohen, to commit multiple felonies. Michael Cohen, by the way, being sentenced right now as we are recording the show. We'll have news about that for you tomorrow. We are still waiting to find out what degree of illegal coordination with a foreign power took place during the 2016 election. We're waiting to figure out what is Robert Mueller aware of when it comes to obstruction of justice and witness tampering. So we may at some point go from the theoretical to the practical in having to figure out, can a sitting president be indicted, or would a sitting president have to be impeached first before indictments could follow, if indeed that president wasn't pardoned preemptively? This is all in the realm of opinion, right? There is no law which says you can indict a sitting president. There is no constitutional provision which would prevent the indictment of a sitting president. It's not been tested whether you can indict a sitting president, but we've heard lots of serious legal opinions over the last 6 months which say you wouldn't be able to do it. We have now a contrasting opinion, which I'm going to present to you today, and it's from Laurence Tribe, who's a legal scholar and a professor at Harvard Law School here in the Boston area, who simply disagrees with the assessment that you can indict a sitting president. He says, oh yeah, a sitting president can be prosecuted, no problem, and in fact, it's part of how the framers of the Constitution wanted a president who is not immune from consequences if they do the wrong thing. Tribe wrote an op-ed piece in the Boston Globe this week where he simply says, okay, the Justice Department might have a sort of de facto policy where they would not indict a sitting president. But such a policy, Tribe argues, would be unconstitutional. And Tribe actually points out specifically that the strategy predicted by conservative columnist Jennifer Rubin earlier this week is likely to be exactly why indictment of a sitting president is possible. Rubin suggested, and we did this clip for you earlier in the week, that Donald Trump would resign 10 minutes before the next Democratic president would be inaugurated. That could be in 2021, that could be in 2025, so that Mike Pence would be president for those last 10 minutes of Trump's term and would issue a preemptive pardon, making it so that Donald Trump could not be indicted after he leaves the White House. We know that the framers of the Constitution took very seriously that we shouldn't have a king in the United States and that there have to be ways to deal with a potentially corrupt or criminal person becoming president of the United States. So thus, leaving presidents free to sort of cash in these get out of jail free cards with preemptive resignation and pardoning by their vice presidents, who could be just as corrupt as they are. We don't know yet when it comes to Mike Pence, but the vice president could be just as corrupt as the president. It seems unimaginable as what the framers would want, that they would want such a system where a president can effectively make themselves not vulnerable to any consequences to their actions. The point that Tribe makes in the op-ed, which I encourage you to read yourself, is that no matter what your view is on why you can't indict a sitting president, that it would be unconstitutional. If the Justice Department has a policy that says we don't indict sitting presidents, Tribe argues that would be unconstitutional. It definitely doesn't seem that such a formal policy exists. But what if the president can always preemptively have themselves pardoned by the VP? That also would be unconstitutional if indeed there is no other way to make or to subject a president to consequences, Tribe argues. Still, for now, this is in the realm of the theoretical, but it's getting closer and closer to becoming a real issue rather than merely a theoretical one. Closer than it's been in a very long time in American history, and we may well see it tested in the coming years. The entire perspective of Laurence Tribe and those who, by the way, when I've mentioned that the The overwhelming majority of legal opinions I've read say you can't indict a sitting president. People write to me and they say, no, David, that's not accurate. Their view is effectively, we have a president and not a king. Any system which truly puts the president off limits from consequences is what we would see in a theocracy or a dictatorship, not the type of government that the framers established. The problem with this entire argument, Pat, is that it does sort of depend on constitutional interpretation and inferring what the framers had in mind. That's a minefield when it comes to something this serious.
Well, I certainly hope that if this is litigated, they would find that you can indeed indict a sitting president. And I'm not just saying that because Trump is president or because a Republican's president. I just buy into this idea that no person should be above the law, and that includes the president. And how bad would it be for the country if this goes to the Supreme Court and they vote completely on party lines? Like all 5 conservative justices say that you can't indict a sitting president and the 4 liberals say that you can. I think that would be really bad for the country.
Once again, for everybody who said Supreme Court doesn't matter, Trump versus Hillary doesn't matter, it's all basically going to be the same. Yeah, we're quickly seeing that that's not the case. One last thing on this. I got a question in the email from a viewer who said, if Trump can be indicted and is indicted and goes to prison, but the Senate, still controlled by Republicans, won't vote to remove him after the House files articles of impeachment, could we have a president running the country from prison? In theory, you could. Realistically, you would think that the cabinet would determine, okay, the president can't carry out their duties from prison, and that the cabinet would use the 25th Amendment to remove Trump in that case. Would Betsy DeVos actually cast that vote, though, in that case? I hope so, although I don't really know. I think you are really going to like this one. I was watching the videos I'm about to play for you today, like the Zapruder film of John F. Kennedy's assassination, looking at the insanity on an almost frame-by-frame level. Here's what happened yesterday. This is the best. Donald Trump decided to invite the leaders of the Democratic Party, as of right now, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, in the House and Senate, respectively, to the White House to chat, including about the border wall with Mexico. Mike Pence, the vice president, was also there. They brought in cameras. Trump started running his mouth, and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer put Trump in his place in a way that is not only glorious, but cringeworthy in terms of Donald Trump and Mike Pence's presence there. And it is just a pleasure to watch. It's a pleasure to listen to, and we're going to do exactly that. But before we get into the video, what made Donald Trump think that this was a good idea? I can't say. Maybe he was overestimating his ability to think on his feet and appeared to know a damn thing, but it went so bad for him. First, Donald Trump starts telling Nancy Pelosi that he has the votes in the House to just build the wall on the Mexican border. Of course, he doesn't. And when Pelosi points it out, Trump weirdly seems to say, no, I have the votes, but I have the Republican votes. But of course, that ignores that you need Democrats as well. It just makes no sense. Pay attention in this first clip to how Donald Trump interrupts and just talks over Nancy Pelosi. And I don't say this because I'm, quote, triggered by Donald Trump, quote, mansplaining or anything like that. I'm just pointing out the brazen nature of how Trump is so sure in what he's saying, despite the fact that it's totally wrong. Take a look.
If I needed the votes for the wall in the House, I would have them in one session, would be done. It doesn't help because we need 10 Democrats in the Senate.
Don't put it on the Senate. Put it on the negotiation.
Okay, let me ask you this, and we're doing this in a very friendly manner. It doesn't help for me to take a vote in the House where I will win easily with the Republicans. It doesn't help to take that vote because I'm not going to get the vote of the Senate. I need 10 senators. That's the problem.
You have the White House. You have the Senate.
I have the
you
White
have
House.
The House
The White House is done,
Representatives.
and the House would give me the vote if I wanted it. But I can't because I need, Nancy, I need 10 votes from Chuck.
Mr.
Let me say
President, let me just say one thing. The fact is, you do not have the votes in the House.
Nancy, I do. And we need border security.
Nancy, we'll find out.
Nancy, we need border security. It's very simple.
Of course we do.
We need border security.
We do.
People are pouring into our country, including terrorists.
It's not clear whether the disconnect is mathematical for Trump or conceptual or ideological, but he just seems not to get it. So anyway, this throws Trump into a tizzy, that at one point he says he understands that Nancy Pelosi is in a weak negotiating position, which he points out, no, she's not, and please don't characterize my position in this discussion. And then Trump goes so haywire that he says he would gladly shut down the government. Trump, who constantly has preemptively said that if government gets shut down, even if Republicans control everything, it would still be the fault of Democrats. Trump, who slammed Obama for the government shutdown that Republicans caused during Obama's presidency, now, for some reason, says he would gladly shut down government if he doesn't get what he wants. The effective, it's tantamount to saying, I'm going to take my ball and go home. And then he gets into it with Chuck Schumer, and it goes just as poorly as when he was arguing with Nancy Pelosi.
You've said it. Okay, you want to put that on my...
You said it.
I'll take it.
Okay, good.
You know what I'll say? Yes. If we don't get what we want, one way or the other, whether it's through you, through a military, through anything you want to call, I will shut down the government.
Okay,
absolutely.
fair enough.
And
We
I am
disagree.
proud, and I'll
We
tell you what,
disagree.
I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck, because the people of this country don't want criminals and people that have lots of problems and drugs pouring into our country. So I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it. The last time you shut it down, it didn't work. I will take the mantle of shutting down. And I'm going to shut it down for border
But we
security.
believe you.
This is just the best. I mean, there's a picture of Pelosi and Schumer leaving the White House, and they just have these you-know-what eating grins on their faces because the guy just looks so stupid. He will never realize it. He will never know it. Some of his supporters may also think that he appears strong here. He thinks he looks strong when he does it, but he's in over his head, Pat, and it becomes so clear when he ends up talking himself into a corner saying, you know what, I'll gladly shut down government if you don't give me everything I want, and I won't blame you. I will take responsibility for doing it. Just mistake after mistake and looking like a fool.
It was pretty clear that Nancy Pelosi got the better end of Trump in their exchange, and she was certainly right. But with Chuck Schumer, I don't know. It's not so clear. Like, I think that soundbite could really come back to bite Trump if the government does indeed shut down. But Chuck Schumer, he's not engaging. He has terrible posture. He's hunched over. Like, I don't know if on an optics level if that plays so well for the Democrats.
Oh, no. Yes, Chuck Schumer doesn't seem to have great posture, but he is having a grand old time. He set the trap. Trump walked directly into it. And Trump is just so mad that he's not getting his way that he starts making absolutely ludicrous threats. He's saying, if you don't do what I want, I'm going to take my ball and go home, or I'm going to pour oil in the sandbox so that nobody can enjoy it. I will shut down the government. And the best thing about all of it, if we can put up the picture, Pat, possibly, the best thing is that Mike Pence is a mannequin, okay? Mike Pence is not moving. He shows no signs of life during this entire thing. He apparently thought if I stay completely still, maybe people will forget that I'm even in the room for this stuff. I mean, just utterly amazing down to the most minute level. I want to hear from you about this. What did you think when you saw it? I'm on Twitter at @DPakman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Our program is mostly funded by the audience, people who listen to the show, people who watch the show, and we have this thing called membership, which you can sign up for at www.joinpakman.com. Today's newest member of the day is Darren Gibson. Darren signed up recently, and he's a great guy, and I'm thrilled to have Darren as a supporter of the show. Also want to say thanks to someone who's been supporting the show for much longer, Stefan Viudez, who has been following the show for years and has been a member for nearly 5 years. Stefan, thank you. Darren, thank you. Join them at www.joinpakman.com. You can also make pledges. If membership seems too involved for you, which it shouldn't, it's very simple, but if it does, you can pledge as little as $1 a month on Patreon at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Any amount you want to pledge, $1, $2.17, $1,000 a month as someone pledges, any amount is welcome. Patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Let's get into this week's Hatriot Mail. If you've never heard Hatriot Mail before, it's when a professional narrator, professional voiceover artist does interpretive readings of the hate mail that I get. Here's a little more information about Hatriot Mail.
Hey, let's face it. The only logical response to guns is more f***ing guns. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
Okay, so this week's Hatriot Mail, like many, uses a lot of the buzzwords that are frequently parts of Hatriot Mail, but it actually introduces a term that I don't know if it could come from some kind of faulty autocorrect of my last name, but it does make me reminisce about my youth. Take a listen to this and see if you can spot it.
Great blanket statement by a massively biased propagator, David Walkman. Being a regressive like yourself is aligned with men who are absurdly beta. Tragic stuff. David Pakman is clearly a beta cuck because he looks like he showers regularly. David, you are so stupid. You don't even know that you are a socialist.
Yeah, so once again with the I'm actually a socialist and don't even realize it. Explain to me how. I'm getting slammed by those who say I should be a socialist and by those who are saying I am a socialist. But when I saw, instead of David Parkman, instead of whatever other insults, David Walkman, I actually am of an age where the Walkman was phasing out as I was in my youth. This is completely foreign to you, right, Pat? I mean, you have no idea what these portable tape players are.
I mean, I know what it is because I've seen old TV shows, but that wasn't part of my generation. I grew up with iPods.
Yeah, it was back when the world was still in black and white that they still use those. Make Hatriots cry by using the coupon code Hatriot40 when you get a membership at www.joinpakman.com. You go to that website, joinpakman.com, select the membership of your choice. When presented with the option to enter a coupon code, you type in Hatriot40, Hatriot40. This saves you 40%, and it sends a message to the Hatriots. It's a middle finger, really, to the Hatriots that says, you will not be intimidated by their insults, and you are supporting the David Pakman Show. Thank you. It brings me no comfort and only disappointment to tell you today that the United States is unfortunately, sadly, becoming part of an alliance for the bad. And I will explain what I mean. Back at a 2015 climate conference, a major study on the climate was commissioned for the IPCC to undertake. They did this, and the report came out about 6 weeks ago or so. And what it sought to do was assess the impact on our planet of a temperature increase of 1.5 degrees Celsius, which the report did. But the report also pointed out, we've assessed the impact of 1.5 C, but we're actually heading towards a 3 degree Celsius increase this century rather than the 1.5 that we were initially asked to assess. And it's really, really bad. Poland is set to host climate talks soon. I mentioned that to you in the last few weeks. We now have 4 countries, that object to the Poland meeting welcoming this IPCC report. Those 4 countries are Russia, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the United States. So first of all, the common theme there is oil. Kuwait, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and the U.S. all benefit from plentiful harvesting of oil and use of oil. The top oil producing countries are on the same page when it comes to prioritizing their oil production over the planet. Not a big shocker. In order to stop the warming, the world would have to change its ways in terms of behaviors that impact the climate, but that would also mean an impact on the oil industries of these 4 countries. Saudi Arabia fought to limit the conclusions of the report. All 4 countries want the report noted in Poland rather than welcomed in Poland. This is pure politics, right? I mean, that's what it is. But geopolitically, we have no choice but to contend with the reality that the United States under Donald Trump is increasingly part of this science-denying, oil-obsessed coalition. Obama did many bad things, and I talked about them when he was president of the United States. But do any of us believe that the United States would be part of this four-country anti-science coalition if Barack Obama were still president? Hillary Clinton had endless flaws. I didn't vote for her in the Democratic primary. But can anybody honestly say that she would have participated in an objection to this climate report if she was president of the United States? This is one of the issues of our time. And we're in a coalition that includes Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait, and no other countries. And I've said before, Pat, you can judge people by the company that they keep to a great degree. The United States pulls out of the Paris Climate Agreement, only country to do that. The United States protests an IPCC climate change report, and we're in cahoots on that issue with Russia and Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. Are we the bad guys? Because more and more of the world is seeing us that way.
Yeah, apparently so. We can only hope that the rest of the world understands that Trump isn't the best representative of the United States and how most of the people here think. If this is very hyperbolic, of course, but let's say World War III breaks out. I don't know that we're going to be on the right side of things. I don't know if we're going to be on the side of Canada and France and England. I think it would be more likely that we would end up on the side of Russia and Saudi Arabia.
Well, that's exactly what I was sort of thinking last night as I was reading up on this story. Is it a good thing that we are increasingly the ones standing with Russia and Saudi Arabia on anything and not with France and England and Canada and so many of our traditional allies? This should horrify all Americans, but unfortunately there are Trumpists who see this and are emboldened by it. They're proud to be the laughingstock of the world because they see it as Trump not taking people's crap. It's getting worse. On the climate issue, we're running out of time, and we have someone who's making the problem even more acute and the situation even more desperate. Make sure you're following me on Instagram, david.pakman. Also follow the show on Instagram at David Pakman Show, which is now featuring early releases of Hatriot Mail, rejected voicemails that don't make it on to the full show, and a lot of other great stuff. At David Pakman Show on Instagram. Follow us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to be joined today by Dr. Hagai Levine, who is from Hebrew University-Hadassah School of Public Health. He's also the lead author of a meta-analysis into what is happening with sperm count and male fertility. Dr. Levine, it's so great to talk to you. I've been reading more and more about this issue, and I think it's one that a lot of people may not even know is going on. So let's introduce the audience to what you've been studying. What trend are you seeing within sperm count and male fertility around the world?
Well, if I may, before I start, I actually start my presentation with the famous statue of David. And this is to mention that we are interested in male fertility, not only of kings, for many years. However, for some reason, we totally neglected male fertility. Now, what's important about the trend of sperm count, before we get to the results, is that sperm count is not only a great indicator for male fertility, it's also influenced a lot by the environment, so we can learn from it about the impact of the environment on human health. And more than that, recent studies have shown that sperm count and semen quality is a predictor of morbidity and mortality. So if we have a problem with sperm count, it suggests that we have a problem with men's health in general. So against this background, we wanted to know what are the trends of sperm counts around the world. Now, 25 years ago, there was a seminal paper by Carlson and others, which claimed that there is a decline in sperm count, at least in Western countries. However, this paper was received with a lot of criticism, and there was still a debate. So what we tried to achieve is to systematically review the literature. We screened over 7,500 papers to get all the papers with good data on sperm count and to model the trends over time. This is called a meta-analysis.
And what were the results that you found when doing this meta-analysis?
So the results were shocking. No matter how we analyzed the data, there was over 50% decline in both sperm concentration and total sperm count among men from Western countries over the last 40 years. Imagine any indicator, human indicator, that declined by 50% in 40 years. When we modeled only studies after 1995, the trend was even steeper. And this is after controlling for various factors such as age and abstinence time. So if we summarize it, Houston, we have a problem. We have a problem with sperm count among men from Western countries. Unfortunately, we simply don't have enough data to know what are the current trends among men from non-Western countries.
Yeah, so one question was going to be, what do we know about men from non-Western countries? You've sort of preempted that by saying we don't exactly know. Can you talk a little bit about within Western countries, are there any other trends, whether they are demographic trends, whether they are particular countries? Is it most noticeable within any other subgroups that you've looked at?
So I am a scientist. As a scientist, I focus on the facts. And the fact is that in this study, our aim was to study the trends. And I cannot say based on this study what may be the cause or what are the populations or countries with the largest decline. So unfortunately, this study, as any study, is limited to answer the question, is there a decline or not, and what is the magnitude? However, from my studies and from other people's studies, we can say something about your question. So we know many of the problems that harm sperm count and harm male fertility. We know that male reproductive health is determined mainly in two periods in life. In the fetal period, when the male reproductive system is developing. And this time you need a very specific cascade of hormones in order for the testicles to develop properly. And we know that even 1 part per million, one drop in a swimming pool of an endocrine disruptor could disrupt this development and manifest later on in life as low sperm count or as testicular cancer or other problems of the male reproductive system. So we know that exposure to chemicals such as phthalates, we know that exposure to stress, we know that maternal smoking, all this could harm testicular development and could be some of the explanation for the decline we see in sperm count, which means that when we look for the causes, we should not only look at the causes over the last 40 years, but we should go maybe 70, 80 years and look what happened in the world. And we know that during this time, there was obesity epidemic, there was massive exposure of the population to new chemicals, man-made chemicals that we were never exposed before, and some of them were proven to disrupt development of the hormonal system, of the testicular system. On the other hand, also during adult life, men produce sperm by millions every day. It's amazing. There is spermatogenesis process, which takes about 80 days. So if an adult man like you, David, is exposed to chemicals or to smoking or is obese or is not physically active, it affects directly his spermatogenesis and his semen quality. And we could also look for some of these reasons, and we know that men nowadays are more obese and much less physically active. So this could also be part of the causes of the sperm decline. What I think we have to do, we have to acknowledge that this is a major public health problem on the global level, but also on the personal level. This is an opportunity for each one of us to promote our own health, which will improve our health and improve our fertility as well. And we need to take steps beside doing much more research, because we know very little about men's reproductive health. We need to take steps to protect ourselves from chemicals, from smoking, from obesity and certain foods, and be more active.
So let's see if we can explore a couple of the ways in which this has consequences. So when it comes to human reproduction, as you mentioned, we're talking about the production of sperm cells by the millions. You only need one in order to have a baby. So conceivably, we could say that the impact is not necessarily the greatest when it comes to human reproduction, because there's a sort of significant buffer built in, because you produce millions. If you divide that by 2, it's still millions. You just need one. But it seems as though this issue is connected to many other areas of health for men. Is that true, or do you believe that I'm wrong, that it is an issue for human reproduction?
So, as we say, you're both right and wrong. So this is a strong claim, and the problem now, it's only the tip of the iceberg. The problem may continue if we don't understand what are the causes. I'm not saying, but other people saying, if you take the same graph, by 2050, we'll reach 0. So I don't want to predict the future. We don't know what will happen in the future. But even if there is a chance of 1% that this decline will continue and we have, almost complete lack of sperm, we definitely need, to do something about that.
Yeah, at that point, it will be a problem for reproduction.
Right. Also, I know from my friends, and maybe you and our viewers know from their friends, that nowadays many couples have problem conceiving. They take them longer time, and many of them need assisted reproduction. Now, the animals, while they don't use assisted reproduction, we think we are, the best animal in the world, we are unable to do the most basic function of life, to reproduce. We need technology in order to reproduce. And the most common factor when you study couples that have problem conceiving, the most common problem is the male factor. So, it's 40% according, different studies, but 40% male factor, 30% female factor, and 30% combined or unknown factor. So this is a huge problem nowadays. Many men nowadays are subfertile, which is a bit under the radar because we don't talk about it and it's neglected, we don't admit it, and we have technological solutions. So the problem is already now. But besides that, my point that this is a very important indicator. It means that we have a problem with our way of living that seriously disrupt a major function. And if we don't understand what are the causes and reverse them, we will continue to be insulted. And this goes together with increase in many different kinds of cancer, in specific congenital malformations, and in men's health in general. So as an indicator, we need to do something about it. Now also about the first issue, just to say, when you go before 40 million per ml, studies shows that you start to be subfertile. Now the mean got from 99 to 47. It means that a huge proportion is below 40. So clearly, already now, the percentage of men that are subfertile is definitely larger than it used to be 50 years ago. So we need to do something about it because of fertility issues, because of health issue, and because it reflects a problem that we need to acknowledge.
Okay, in the very limited time we have left, I would love to hear from you. I know you said we don't know what is causing it, but can you give us some sense of what some of the studies are looking at? In other words, are we talking about diet? Are we talking about pharmaceuticals? Are we talking about environmental factors? Are we talking about all of these things?
So first, we looked at sperm count, but maybe also the sperm function is hampered. Maybe one sperm that belongs to a population that is smaller than what used to be before, maybe is also damaged in some way. And we do have studies, answering your question, we do have studies on endocrine disrupting chemicals, which hints that they not only impair the quantity, but also the quality. We see epigenetic changes in the single sperm. So personally, I am studying and I'm worried about the impact of pesticides and of phthalates and other man-made chemicals on our fetal development, especially of the male, and on our, on our bodies during adult life. And we are doing a mass experiment on human population, exposing them for the first time to many, many chemicals that interact together. And maybe some of them are very harmful, not only to ourselves, but also to next generations. And the effects may be transgenerational. So personally, I'm very worried about chemicals. And I think we should do much more, not only in studying these chemicals, but also reversing the burden of proof. I think that before you introduce a chemical to massive use and exposure of the public, it's your obligation to show that is harmless. Nowadays, you can use any chemicals, expose many people, and unless you see the bodies and have a clear proof that it's harmful, there is no regulation. So that's my main worry. Together with that, I think that we can do much better job in public health, in preventing obesity, improving our diet, eating less processed food, being more physically active, fighting tobacco and smoking. All of these factors that clearly harm our personal and public health, and also male fertility.
We've been speaking with Dr. Hagai Levine. He is at Hebrew University's Hadassah School of Public Health. Thank you so much for talking to us about this issue today.
Thank you, David. It was a pleasure.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We could have had J.D. Scholten in Iowa's 4th Congressional District, but instead, incumbent, lunatic, outrageous, ideological, disgusting, neo-Nazi white nationalist associated Republican Steve King was able to retain his seat in a narrow win. That got us to yesterday, when the House had a hearing where they questioned Google CEO Sundar Pichai. The idea, I guess, was to explore bias in search results, sort of, but the questions were mostly uninformed and based in vague conspiracy theories about Google manipulating search results and a total lack of practical technology knowledge by the members of the committee. And at one point during these hearings, Steve King, who again is a totally clueless guy tied to white nationalists, one of the worst Republicans in the House of Representatives, he angrily demanded answers from Google CEO about how an iPhone works, which of course is not made by Google. It's made by Apple, which is actually sort of a competitor to Google, at least on some platforms. There is so much going on in the clip I'm about to play for you that I want to prepare you for it. So number one, you'll notice that when Steve King asks this question to Sundar Pichai, he actually hesitates for a second. Sundar does. You can see him weighing the options and debating in his own mind. Do I give some kind of diplomatic answer about how iPhones work? Or do I treat this guy like the moron that he is and explain that Google just simply doesn't make the iPhone? Watch for that crucial moment where you can see him running through the possibilities in his head. You're also going to notice that in the background of the video, there's someone dressed like the Monopoly guy, like from the board game Monopoly. That's Ian Madrigal, who has shown up before at hearings dressed as Uncle Pennybags from Monopoly to call attention to the lobbying money that floats around Congress. So all of that and more is happening in this clip. Let's take a look.
I have a 7-year-old granddaughter who picked up her phone before the election, and she's playing a little game, kind of game a kid would play, and up on there pops a picture of her grandfather. And I'm not going to say into the record what kind of language was used around that picture of her grandfather, but I'd ask you, how does that show up on a 7-year-old's iPhone who's playing a kid's game?
Congressman, iPhone is made by a different company, and so, you know, I mean...
it might have been an Android. It's just, it was a hand-me-down of some kind.
You know,
I'd ask...
I'm happy to follow up and understand the specifics. There may be an application which was being used, which had a notification, but I'm happy to understand it better and clarify it for you.
Okay. Thank you for your testimony, and yield back the balance of my time. Appreciate it.
This is just amazing. And the defenders are saying, oh, listen, the question could have applied to Android or iPhone. It's such a stupid question. I mean, quite frankly, it's such a stupid question. And so that's like the headline, goofy, outrageous clip. But there's actually plenty of Democrats and Republicans exposing how clueless they are about how the internet works during this hearing. Here's another one. This is Congressman Lamar Smith, a Republican from Texas. He asks Google's CEO to confirm that Google has never punished anybody for manipulating search results. And Google's CEO says no, because no individual person can do that. Take a look.
Number two, also to my knowledge, you've never sanctioned any employee for any type of, for manipulating the search results whatsoever. Is that the case?
The time of the gentleman has expired, but Mr. Pichai will be allowed to answer the question.
And very quickly, it's not possible for an individual employee or groups of employees to manipulate our search results. You know, we have a robust framework, including many steps in the process.
Well,
and
my time is up. Let me just say I disagree. I think humans can manipulate the process. It is a human process at its base. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Chair recognizes.
This is just the best. Lamar Smith disagrees. He knows nothing about anything, but he disagrees. His feelings override the facts. He feels like individual employees can mess with search results and he wants them punished, even though that's not how it works. Now, of course, I know in some broad sense, it's true, right? I mean, humans made Google, so humans control how the algorithm works. But the idea that you'd punish individuals for manipulating search results is a bit silly. And it just shows how clueless Lamar Smith is. There are other clips if you want to see more. Steve King is a moron. We know that. His constituents had a chance to vote him out. They opted to reelect him. Okay. The bigger picture from these hearings is that it exposes that we have members of Congress who don't know a thing about technology in charge of figuring this stuff out. This is why, instead of mostly older lawyers and CEOs from industry, we need younger people. We need people from more diverse backgrounds, scientists, people from more diverse professions. Case in point, we found out after Republican Senator Lindsey Graham had been on some tech committee, maybe it was cybersecurity, don't remember exactly. He had been on this committee for a while. It was revealed that he had never sent an email in his life. Lindsey Graham's 63 years old. Email has been around in some form since he was 17 years old. Admittedly, it wasn't ubiquitous back then, but it's been around and commonly used since Lindsey Graham was in his mid-30s. Pat, why does he have to be on a cybersecurity or tech committee if he's never even sent an email? Like, is this really the best that we can do?
This is the best that we have. Like you said, most of these people are lawyers and they've been politicians for decades, so they don't understand tech. And it's not to say that they can't ask tough questions. I think they can, and they can press these CEOs and make sure that they get to the bottom of things. But they should do less grandstanding and more listening at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, just the questions expose how little they understand about how things work. And I'm reminded of that law. Someone at one point in New York State got off on child porn charges because of how the law was written. Just viewing child porn is not possessing it because you didn't like right click save as to your computer. And this allowed people, at least one person, potentially more, to get out of child porn charges. Then they went in and changed the law. And it's this kind of reactive situation. We need, on issues of technology and cybersecurity, we need our elected officials to be proactive. You can't be proactive unless you have some understanding of what the hell is going on. However impressive it might be what Barron Trump is doing with computers, we actually need our elected officials, not the children of presidents, to be knowledgeable, informed, and working for us and proactively rather than seemingly indifferent to how the real world actually operates when it comes to these technologies. I mean, just embarrassing in every way. And hopefully, I mean, the upside is that Steve King's cartoonish demand of Sundar Pichai to explain how an iPhone works, even though Apple makes iPhone, not Google, if it serves the purpose of bringing this hearing out into the open so more people realize the degree of cluelessness that our elected officials have on these issues, I would consider that a benefit, a net gain of Steve King saying really dumb things. We need to take a break from the Republican election fraud disaster in North Carolina's 9th district, which we've been talking about for the last week or so, to get back to the voter irregularities in Florida's midterm elections, which we talked about more like a month ago. Without rehashing the entire Florida situation today, we already knew about some of the strange things that had happened in Florida. This included ballots being held up at a mail handling facility beyond Election Day with no real explanation as to why that happened. The Associated Press can now report that according to Florida officials, thousands of mailed ballots were simply never counted because they were delivered too late, and we don't know why they were delivered too late. This is about 7,000 ballots not counted because they were received after the deadline on Election Day. And the law in Florida is not a postmarked by law. It's a mailed ballots have to be received by 7 p.m. on Election Day to be counted. There's a lawsuit claiming that they should count if mailed before Election Day because we can't explain why they weren't delivered by the deadline. That lawsuit is still pending. But the question is, why weren't they delivered by 7 p.m. on Election Day, given that so many of these were held at a mail handling facility for reasons that are as yet unclear to us? So we now have 7,000 ballots not counted because of this. We have another 4,000 mailed ballots which were set aside because election workers who have no expertise in handwriting analysis determined that the signatures on the mailed ballots didn't match comparison signatures that were on file. Only 637 of those 4,000 ballots were eventually counted. So we're talking about nearly 11,000 ballots already without even getting into all of the other irregularities. So listen, would the results have been different in these Florida races if these were the only irregularities, these 11,000 ballots, and all of those ballots went for the Democrat? The answer is no. Okay, that's not the argument I'm making here. What I'm trying to bring out here is that this is a meta issue where one party, the Democrats, have in their platform that we need to fix our elections and make sure everybody who wants to vote has their vote counted. The other party, Republicans, is breaking the election system deliberately to help themselves win by having fewer people vote, or maybe a better way to say it would be by ensuring that fewer votes are counted. And you know, Pat, that when Democrats and Republicans both are guilty of something, I call them both out. This is an issue where the Democrats have in their platform that they want to fix this, whereas Republicans are using these techniques to try to win elections surreptitiously.
And the last place that this should be happening is Florida because of the chaos that transpired in 2000. You know, shortly after that, we did pass the Help America Vote Act, which did some good, but that's nearly 20 years old now. And this absolutely is a meta issue, and we have to solve this for the next election because otherwise Democrats are going to have a tough time winning. And more importantly, the will of the people is not going to be heard.
Yeah, I know which side I'm on, right? I support doing everything we can to ensure more people vote and that their ballots are counted. I'm against voter purges. I don't want to reduce early voting. I don't want to reduce voting locations. I don't like sketchy ways of disqualifying non-matching signatures. I don't like letting Russia mess with elections and not doing a damn thing about it. I know who I support on this issue. It's bad. If people don't care, it's going to get worse. Climate change, campaign finance reform, election systems, net neutrality, ranked choice voting, Medicare for all. It's sounding like a pretty solid platform for Democrats for the next few years. Can they do it? Can they actually capitalize on it? I wish I was more optimistic. We have a voicemail number. That number is 2192-DAVID-P. I got a voicemail suggesting that what may be best for the progressive movement is for Donald Trump to stay in office. Let's take a listen to it.
Hi there. I'm a progressive with an unpopular opinion in regards to the impeachment of Donald Trump. My personal opinion is that we need to keep him in the Oval Office as long as possible if you ever want to secure something like Medicare for all.
Yeah, this is not as unpopular a position as the caller seems to think. I've suggested not specifically for Medicare for all. I think that Trump in the White House may not do anything one way or the other for Medicare for all. I've been saying for a while that what may ultimately be best is for a scandal-ridden Trump to stay in rather than turning the reins over to Mike Pence either through resignation or impeachment, and that over the long term, that's what might catalyze more activism and lead to the best outcome for the left in 2020. The argument around Medicare for all, I'm not sure I fully understand, but actually I know a lot of people who believe this. So it's not a fringe perspective and it's not an unpopular perspective. It's just more one of there are the political implications of impeachment or resignation. And then there's also, is impeachment the right thing? Is resignation the right thing? And you have to consider them both separately, but they also have to be considered sort of in concert with each other. On today's bonus show, Piers Morgan says that he should be Donald Trump's new chief of staff. We're going to talk about McDonald's taking a stand on antibiotic use in beef production. And we will also talk about the CFO from, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, is it Huawei? Who has been granted bail in Canada, Huawei. And we will be talking about that and much more on today's bonus show. How do you get access to the bonus show? Very easy. Become a member, www.joinpakman.com. Become a patron for at least $5 a month, patreon.com/David Pakman Show. We will speak to you on the bonus show in just minutes. Hope you're going to be there.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.